Joining us now, Michael Rubin of the American Enterprise Institute. He is the author of the book, Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engagement. Michael Rubin, we welcome you back to America's Forum as you join us from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for your time, sir. Hey, Michael, give me your take. Are you cautiously optimistic about this ceasefire? What do you think is going to transpire?
Well, ultimately, I worry about Israel losing at the diplomatic table and under international pressure what it's gained on the battlefield. We've seen Hamas execute, reportedly, a number of its tunnel diggers so that no one can give up that information to Israel. But that suggests that perhaps there could be still some tunnels out there about which Israel doesn't know. Israel also needs to worry about certain members of the international community, like Turkey, where Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has just become a strongman president, and the Turkish government has pledged to send another ship, if you will, to Gaza to resupply effectively Hamas.
Well, you take a look at it. We're looking at footage of the tunnels with the here and now of what has transpired. You brought up something very interesting. Hamas is executing its tunnel diggers, correct? That's what you just told us?
According to several reports out of the Gaza Strip, yes.
So it would appear that Hamas wants to continue with those tunnels. You say some of those tunnels may remain undetected. Is there anything in terms of weaponry, in terms of sophisticated imaging that can help the Israelis discover those tunnels?
Well, ultimately, the Israelis are working overtime on ground-penetrating radar in order to do just that. They're hoping for a technological breakthrough that will detect these tunnels and will be as much of a game changer as Iron Dome was with regard to the Hamas missiles. Basically, Israel's trying to stay not one, not two, but 3 steps ahead of Hamas and other terrorists technologically, because they know that terrorists are always going to be gunning for them no matter what and no matter what ceasefire is achieved.
Michael, you mentioned international pressure being brought to bear on Israel for an agreement that might be less than satisfactory militarily to Israel. Interesting take on the op-ed page of the New York Times, headlined, "How Hamas Beat Israel in Gaza." Now, this column argues that if you compare both sides' goals before the fighting started and what they've since achieved, Hamas is the victor. The author of that piece is arguing that for Israel, the latest round of fighting will end politically, at least, at the same place it started. But, and here's the pull quote we want to get to. As much as Israel is seeking to marginalize Hamas and empower the weakened Mr. Abbas, Hamas is, for the first time in its history, on the verge of being internationally recognized as an equal party in the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Do you think, Michael, that in essence is happening, that Hamas is being regarded internationally as an equal partner?
Well, JD, I would never underestimate the capacity of Israeli journalists to self-flagellate. But in this case, while there's a danger, and while that's certainly Hamas's goal, I'm not sure whether Hamas is at that level yet. When you take the broader picture, Egypt under President Mohamed Morsi used to be very sympathetic to Hamas. Now the only 2 countries that are Qatar and Turkey, ironically both American allies. What Hamas is hoping to win at the diplomatic table is that sort of recognition, and what they're counting on is the fact that they've never had such a friendly American administration. I'm not saying that technically the American administration is friendly towards Hamas, but it's so infused with moral equivalence, and it's so desirous of having short-term quiet, whatever the long-term costs, that Hamas is hoping for some sort of diplomatic coup.
You talked about the self-flagellation of Israeli journalists. We also know that there has been continual polarization, and maybe this is putting it mildly, in the domestic political scene in Israel, almost from the dawn of its history. Give me your take on the political situation in Israel on the ground there today. Does the Prime Minister...
There's a divergence.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
JD, there's a divergence between the way the debate is handled in the United States and the West and how it is in Israel. You know, there's never been such unanimity inside Israel, left, right, and center, with regard to the necessity to defeat Hamas and the ridiculousness of trying to negotiate any sort of compromise with a genocidal terrorist group like Hamas. It's actually in the diaspora community where there's much greater divergence of opinion. And what so many in the American left don't realize, in the American left of the Jewish community, is just how much space has grown between their ideological pillars, if you will, and the recognition inside Israel about just what Hamas is and what can and cannot be done to confront it.
And mindful of that difference, Michael, when push comes to shove, if Prime Minister Netanyahu decides we got to go it alone, no matter world opinion, no matter these ceasefires, it's just not working, you believe Israel will stay united to finish the job with Hamas, even in the face of international opinion?
Yes, I do. I mean, ultimately, it's the job of any democratically elected government to protect the security of its citizens, and that's what Prime Minister Netanyahu and his broad-based coalition do every single time. So I have absolutely every confidence that Israel will continue to do that. You know, the silver lining in just the constant bashing of Israel is that it's a situation of in for a penny, in for a pound. Israel knows that they're going to be facing the same international condemnation if they send in one tank into Gaza versus if they level every Hamas infrastructure and structure. And so in that situation, you know, it just makes it easier for Israel to do what's necessary.
Michael Rubin of the American Enterprise Institute, author of the book Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engagement. We thank you for engaging with us in this dialogue. We trust it was not too parlous for you today, and we look forward to your take on this situation in the days to come. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, JD.
So you heard it from Michael Rubin. He believes Israel will go it alone if need be. What is your take on that situation or on any topic we've been talking about today? Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also newsmaxtv.com/comment and facebook.com/Newsmax. Back with your turn and my turn straight ahead.